What's up, everyone? True Techno Gamer here, down in the basement, home theater lab. Got another home theater video for you guys. Wanted to get it up before the end of the year. Again, failed at that, so I'm trying to get a couple of videos I've been working on for the end of 2022. But from a home theater perspective, you guys may have known I've shared a couple of updates to my home theater this year. The most recent two being upgrading of my speaker cables, and then of course getting the AVM90 processor. I also have the LG G2 OLED TV. I did a review on that already, so check that out. I'll put a bunch of cards up for these videos. I did have a little video kind of showing a demo where me listening to some music, and it was a great vibe with the AVM90, but I didn't do a full review, and there's reasons for that. I've had the processor now for, I don't even know, like over 6 months or so, but I didn't feel it's fair to fully review it until I had everything dialed in, and I was still making changes to the room. Got the speaker wires, I did some physical changes to the room, and I have a few more that I've been planning to do. So once I do that, I want to rerun the calibration arc and get everything dialed in, and then I think it would make the most sense to do an actual review. So I wanted to touch on it though. I mean, it's been like 6 months, so I wanted to at least touch a little bit on my impressions and my experience of using the AVM90 processor so far, but I probably won't be able to talk about it in 100% review, from a review standpoint. So, and I'll touch on my experience as well with the upgraded Rocket88 speaker cables. I've never purchased new speaker cables. There's always been a big question of, do speaker cables matter? In terms of, are you really going to hear a difference between different speaker cables or different levels of speaker cables, right? And guys, speaker cables have a huge range, right? You can go to, used to be a Radio Shack, or now I guess your Best Buy or Walmart even, or whatever, and just get a couple of dollars, spend a couple of dollars, get $10, $20 speaker cables, all the way to 5-digit pricing for speaker cables. Truthfully, they do have speaker cables that are 10 grand plus, and actually 6-figure. They have speaker cables that are literally over 100 grand. Ridiculous. Does it matter? Is it meaningful? I've always been of the mindset, no, not really. But I will say that I was receiving the memo that as you continue to elevate the quality of your overall system and its components, you will want to make sure that all of the interconnects and basically your system is only as good as its weakest link, right? So if you have some, $10, $20 Radio Shack speaker wire and you pair it with a $10,000 pair of speakers, that's right. You're kind of limiting what you can get out of those speakers because it's not getting the best signal possible, that kind of thing. Same thing for a processor or amplifier. So that was my motivation. I, again, am hoping to, hopefully sometime this year, upgrade my speakers to a really high level. And I want to make sure that my other components are in place so that I can reap the benefits of what that level of quality can get me, right? And so that was my motivation. I set it on the Rocket, the AudioQuest. These are AudioQuest speakers, Rocket88s. The Rocket series is kind of like they're probably their most popular series, I would say. At least their sweet spot in terms of price and performance. It's a cable that you could find in the Magnolia section of a Best Buy. Their AudioQuest is obviously a hugely well-known, reputable brand. They make all kinds of cables, power cables, Ethernet cables, HDMI cables, everything. And they've been doing this stuff for a while. They've kind of are experts at the science of it. So the speaker cables I had before, I mentioned in my channel, you might have seen, was also AudioQuest, but it was a lower grade AudioQuest. It was the X series. Good name brand, but not the highest quality. So these Rocket88s, I kind of did the unboxing earlier. They're much better build quality. They look like something that is truly high end. The boxing, the actual cables themselves, they feel premium. They feel very robust. thick. They're braiding on them. It's crazy. And they're the first cable in the AudioQuest line, in the Rocket series, to have the active noise canceling that's battery powered. There's an actual powered module connected to the speaker wire. I've never seen this before recently, that actively, injects a noise canceling to kind of make sure that the signal goes through pure. And the Rocket 88 is the flagship of the Rocket series for AudioQuest. So, I didn't want to go too crazy, but, I was going to go with the Rocket 11s and then the Rocket 33s. And I was like, you know what, again, if I'm going to go, let me go in, pretty big, something that I would feel comfortable with for at least some years, as I really, really get down the rabbit hole in this thing. If I get the speakers and, I'm really, really feeling like there's a little bit more I can get out of them down the line. I know I can go higher with the cables for sure. But Rocket 88s are a hell of a start. So what is my impression? I'll tell you this, guys. Initially, when I first swapped them and turned the sound on, I think I was watching TV. It was on just cable, probably like a sports channel thing. I did immediately notice a difference in the sound. I'm gonna say it wasn't a night and day difference, but it immediately was just that. It was much more pure sounding. I can tell that there was more taken away, more unwanted stuff taken away from the sound. It felt like there was noise, which I didn't know was noise, but there was just this extra stuff there that, previously I was used to hearing, but with these, it was gone. So it just sounded more pure. That's the best way to describe it. It's hard to articulate in words, but again, it wasn't like a night and day thing. It would have been hard for me to even demonstrate to someone, especially someone who was not trained and not familiar with my system. Hey, don't you hear that? Even my wife, I couldn't do. But it was a difference. Things sounded just a little bit more detailed. Did feel like I heard the sound stage was a little bit deeper, if that makes sense. The presence with the surround effects and just the sound coming from the speakers was that much better. So it was definitely an improvement. Overall, I would say that I kind of got what I wanted out of them. I mean, I can tell that they're higher quality. At least I know that my speakers are getting a pure signal. But it's not like, this is something that you gotta have. It's not that big of a difference. Now my ears are used to it now, so it's hard for me to even know. A and B comparison, I think, would be a lot more clear for sure. But it's there. On a scale from 1 to 10, if I had to try to quantify how big of a difference it is, 10 being, night and day, and then 1 being, I can't tell anything. I would say that it's probably around a 6-ish. I think that, trained ears and audiophiles alike would probably be able to hear it in my system. But even someone like my wife, who's familiar with this stuff from me, she wouldn't hear a difference. And I couldn't explain the difference to her, right? She hasn't heard a difference. She didn't come down and be like, oh, it sounds a little clearer. It's that kind of thing, right? But I have hooked up to my front 3. I think when I upgrade the speakers, having that there, along with the speaker upgrade and everything, the processor and everything, I think, man, it would sound awesome. So overall, I mean, again, I think that for what speaker cables are, those particular AudioQuest Rocket 88s scream great value and good quality, no question. I think that, everything about them so far has been great for what they are. Whether they're necessary or not, depends on where you're at in the system. But for most people, probably not. Again, they have a much wider range, and you can go down their line as well and get some stuff to enjoy. So part 2, let me touch on my impressions of the Anthem AVM90. Now, I did the video, with me, like I said, listening to music that day. Overall, let me just say that the sound quality, which is the main thing, is definitely improved over my previous Marantz AV8802, which I thought was a pretty good sounding unit, and I can definitely hear how it sounded better than my previous Marantz, the 7000 series, their more entry level processor. Immediately that was noticeable. You know, everything sounded, again, less noise, just more detail, just a better sense of presence across the board. That was noticeable. And then for music, which is, you know, one of the reasons why I went with the AVM90 over the AVM70, you know, that in of itself, like as I showed in that video, the processor by itself, everything else being the same at the time, made a big difference in just my enjoyment of music. The way that it was able to place the sounds, place the instruments, the sound stage, the overall clarity, it was a noticeable step up over the 8802. I haven't listened to the AVM70 directly, definitely not in my space to really compare it A and B, but I will say that, you know, it's hard to imagine the processor sounding better than what the AVM90 is delivering in that regard. It sounded great. You know, again, I don't really have many complaints there. The biggest difference, though, I would say that comes from the AVM90 in my system has to do with the room correction. It is not just, you know, having more accuracy and that kind of thing. Immediately when I ran Arc for the first time, the way that Anthem calibrates is fundamentally different than how Odyssey calibrates for Marantz. The level calibration and how it sets to 75 dB, I guess it kind of looks at it as a minimum. So it calibrates, because obviously the signals that are coming into a speaker isn't flat. It's not the same. So you might get, you know, a sound that's here and a sound that's here, etc. And the way that Anthem does it is it makes sure that the minimum sound that you'll get is calibrated to 75. So what that means is the overall system sounds much higher volume. It sounds like everything is running hot, but it's not. It's running hot, but yet it's still balanced. The overall levels are noticeably higher, much higher than what Odyssey used to calibrate. And that's one of the biggest things. So it makes the sound more enjoyable because, again, it's not just artificially louder. It's louder, but yet still more balanced with all the accuracy and the detail and, you know, the tonal balance that comes with room correction as well. And the phase delays, the timing, obviously the crossover, all of that stuff is obviously still accounted for. And the net result is a really, really nice cohesive sound, but that sounds like it just has a lot more presence from every channel. And that to me is the biggest difference. Because even watching like television with the Marantz, I'll be watching television or music or listening to a song. And for me to like kind of, when I really want to push it and kind of just get more of a sense of immersion with increased volume, I would have to turn the Marantz up quite a bit. I mean, Marantz, you know, when I'm really like pushing, if I had the house to myself and I'm really like, hey, I want to kind of blast this, I would be pushing like -10, some cases -5, depending on the content. And in some cases, even -5 and -10 with certain movies, certain games, certain music, still didn't really sound that like loud and that present. Hard to explain, but I had a little more cases with that, to the point where I used to think that something was wrong with my speakers and, you know, a bunch of different things. And then I was like, well, I guess that's what it is. You know, and again, I know the Marantz wasn't a cheap, you know, unit. It's a high quality flagship product, so from a reputable company. So I'm like, okay, maybe, you know, something is missing here. And that went out the window when I got the AVM90, right? Because I immediately, what was immediately clear was that it wasn't my speakers for sure. It wasn't even the room. The processor has a lot to do with that. And now with the Anthem, my blasting it on the Anthem is like -20. I don't think I mean, maybe once or twice have I ever really dipped below -20. Because honestly, most content, games, movies, -20 in this system, in this room, is more than I can handle. At least by myself. Now, if I had a room full of people, you know, more noise, more, you know, volume, yeah, I could probably turn it up. But it's good to know that I have that headroom to turn it up with this Anthem. So that's probably like the single biggest difference. I mean, yeah, there's everything is there. The more details there. The DACs, which is the main thing, is awesome. I only have 2 subs, so I'm not taking advantage of the 4 subwoofer, independent subwoofer channels that the processor is capable of. So that's there. So from a sound quality standpoint, yes. The overall like user interface and user experience, that is an area where I would say is lacking behind Marantz. Marantz was just so easy to use. It had an on-screen display, which the Anthem does not have. It doesn't have on-screen display at all. It shows the input and the volume on the screen. That's it, right? Anything you want to do, you can use the little screen on the processor potentially, or there's an app you can do it through your phone, or you can do it through a computer using from the Anthem, using like a bigger interface from the web. Those are your options. So like really go in and dig in the menus. And I mean, you can do everything you need to do. Having an app helps because sometimes I'll just do that to do quick things. But I do miss having an on-screen display. Everything just worked. Everything I ever tried to do with Marantz just worked. There's still issues with the HDMI handshaking between the G2 and the AVM90. I don't know which one is the culprit at this point. I was hoping that some updates, it's been 6 months, like I said, there would have been some updates that would have helped fix it. It has not been the case. With the Marantz, everything worked. The HDMI, CEC, kind of linking just seamlessly worked. I would press power on my TV. Every single time it will power everything from there. If I switch inputs on the TV, the Marantz processor automatically knew how to switch inputs to whatever it was. I had programmed it. It was beautiful. It was something that literally at the time my 3-year-old and 4-year-old son could use. And that's not working like that with this setup. So I have to switch the inputs manually on the remote. The TV powering on everything works half of the time. It's literally like a 50-50 thing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's really weird. The only input that switches automatically is when I go to my games to the PS5. But if I go to the PS5 back to TV, it does not switch back to the TV audio. I have to go and grab the remote and switch it manually. I do have a Logitech remote, a kind of an older Logitech remote that I could use as well. That seems to work for the activities in general. But I'm just saying, like, it's just not as seamless an experience there. The overall UI and like using a remote and such, it's not quite as just intuitive, I guess, as the Marantz was. Again, everything is there, right? It's just a matter of using it. So, I mean, it's not a huge deal because, I don't have to dig in the menus too much. I'm not really, you don't spend a whole lot of time, like, dealing with the UX for the processor once it's set up and such. But it is something to just note that, if I had to say which one was definitely more friendly to use, easy to use, more reliable in that regard, definitely the Marantz. It is good to know that Anthem, is updating software, frequently though. So they are fixing and addressing a bunch of things. But, that's probably like the biggest negative, I guess, on the processor. But yeah, the other thing I would say that I like about it for me is that, it is something I bought to be of an in-game level. There's nothing else I can look at around and say, oh, that's just better in a way that, is attainable the way this was for a similar price, similar means, a similar tier, so to speak. I would say that everything that's within the processor's price range, it at least matches, if not beats in some regards. Sure, this processor is missing Aural 3D. Not a big deal. It's another 3D format like Dolby Atmos. Not a big deal because there really isn't a whole lot of content in Aural 3D, especially here in the United States. But a lot of people say they like it because of the upmixer, that it sounds better even than Dolby's upmixer. I've never heard it. So, even if that's the case, again, it's the upmixer, not a huge deal. Dolby upmixer sounds great as is anyway. But yeah, it's missing Dolby, it's missing Aural 3D. It's still missing the room support. It's supposed to have room support. It's something that Anthem has said will be there, but it's still not there. I think they're kind of taking their time with it, clearly. I've never used Room, so again, not a huge deal for me at this point, but just pointing out that, there are a couple of features, I guess, that prevents it from just being the absolute, pinnacle. But overall, it has everything that needs to be. It has Dolby Atmos, DTSX, IMAX Enhance. It's 8K, HDMI 2.1 compatible. I play my game through it all the time, so I know that it works, which is awesome. Everything is there. It's pretty much state of the art. The only other process that clearly you could say is a step up in terms of being more of an end gamer is the Trinov, of course. Trinov altitude 32 or 16. But the Trinov is, even the 16 is literally over twice the price, right? So, that's a whole nother beast. But if you're looking for like the absolute pinnacle and you have the money, of course, you have an awesome dedicated room and, you're kind of going, holding those bars to your home theater, Trinov would be probably still the way to go. It's the most future-proof and most feature-packed and most upgradable. But short of that, Anthem is up there. Marantz recently redid their whole line, and now they were a lot cheaper than this Anthem, at least the AVM90 level. But now their processor, their flagship processor, is pretty much the same price. They did catch up and add more channels to match the Anthem, but it has some of those other features that Anthem is still lacking. It has the HDMI 2.1, of course, in 8K. But I believe that actually has DTSX Pro, and it has Auro 3D, etc. I mean, again, but it's the same price. They haven't done A and B comparison yet. Marantz says that they upgraded the sound quality and the DACs and everything to bring it up to a level. I don't know offhand what DACs they use there, but needless to say, I would say that, again, it's probably on par at best with the Anthem. I doubt that it just beats it, but again, it's going to have UX experiences and features that may be better. But that's there. Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of processors out there from different companies. If nothing else, none of them have the Anthem Arc room correction. That's another thing. A lot of them are adding Dirac. Dirac seems to be now like the kind of industry standard, kind of like what Odyssey was. It seemed like it was, around 10 years ago. Is going to be Dirac, and Dirac is pretty good from what I've heard. It's not as good as Arc in some ways. It matches Arc in some ways. In some cases, some people say it's better than Arc in some ways. But in general, I mean, Arc is still kind of Anthem's claim to fame, and it works great for me. So, that's pretty much it. I mean, I still want to move, like I said, finish my room and move some stuff around. When I go back and dial it in, I can really start listening to watching movies, listening to music, and really enjoying it. But it's an awesome processor, meaningful, easily noticeable upgrade from what I had. And for me, it delivers what I want. I still feel like I just haven't fully experienced it yet. That's why I was, reluctant to do a full review. But like I said, the negatives have mostly to do with the UI stuff. There were just some quirks. Some bugs. I mean, I didn't run into a lot of specific bugs, but there's some quirkiness with some things sometimes for sure. Like I said, with just how the interoperability works with the system. But the overall experience, the overall sound, the overall, room correction and feature set and capability, everything, works well. So Anthem AVM90 is a hit. Is it worth the double the price of the AVM70? Again, my inclination is probably not. Like, it's not something I would think is twice as good as the Anthem AVM70. It's 90% the same, right, to be honest. AVM70, would work better for home theater, sorry. AVM90 would work better for music because it has the higher end DACs and the higher end circuitry. It has the 4 subwoofer outputs, which, not relevant for me right now, but for some people it might be. Is that really worth twice the price? Probably not. I would say that if you have the money and have the budget, and you care about music, you really, really care about music and having like a really good 2-channel listening capability, I would go with the AVM90. That's simple. If you're mostly home theater, gaming, TV, movies, mostly, and not really a critical, music listener, and that's your focus of your system, the AVM70 would do you fine. That's what I've been telling people when they ask. So that's my take on it. Take it for what it is. But yeah, I can grow into this Anthem. Again, it has the HDMI 2.1, it has the 8K It has 19 total channels, of which I'm only using 11 right now, or 13, I guess, right now, technically. So I have additional channels in that regard I can grow into. Again, it's a software-based platform, so you know, there's a lot of things that Anthem can do just via firmware updates and stuff like that. But yeah, it's kind of a forward-looking thing for me that hopefully should last me quite a while. I mean, processors do change. They're one of the things that change the quickest. So I'm not saying it would last me 20 years or something, but you know, hopefully it could last me close to 10 at least. And I would say that's pretty good. There it is, True Techno Gamer, just giving you some feedback and wanted to touch on some things. By the way, I really did intend to do a upgraded home theater tour for 2022. The last one I did was a hit for 2021, kind of showing my room coming together. I did make a number of changes to the room over the last year, a bunch of changes actually. Got some new gear that I already shared with you guys and did some touches to the room itself. I didn't do the tour partly because, again, I'm on the verge of doing some other changes that will be fairly significant, and just in terms of being noticeable and kind of changing the overall look of the room. So I was kind of hoping to wait for that to happen. I'm hoping that happens pretty soon here. Once that happens, I will do, you know, kind of an updated video, which at that point will probably be like a year and a half from the previous one. And I think you'd be interested to see, like, you know, how some of the things have changed and, you know, kind of things coming together. So look out for that soon-ish. But in the meantime, True Techno Gamer, appreciate all you guys watching. Please like, subscribe. Please hit me up in the comments. Till the next video, take care.